Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. So this is not where we normally record. Normally you would be seeing some War Thunder gameplay right now, but power's still out. So I'm gonna be reading to you from a little book here. I promised you guys a guide, and I don't want to wait any longer because if I do, it's going to start being very useless to you guys because the event will already be part of the way over. So I wanted to really get this video out, and I hope that the audio in here is not too bad. I'm literally in a garage right now. Got my Beetle behind me as a little bit of a backdrop. I figured it'd be more interesting than me sitting in the dark in my chair in front of my computer. Just a little bit more interesting to look at, not by very much. Also got that ConeOfArc merch on. Check that out, link in the description, probably, maybe not, I don't know. Let's open up to the page. I had to rewrite my whole script. I wrote out a whole script for this, recorded footage, haven't had power all week, still waiting on that. So thanks a lot, Eversource. Before we get started, I want to make sure that I'm clear that this is going to be mostly for air and tank tasks. I'm not familiar with naval. However, I will be linking to a video by Flipped Stug who does naval. He's basically one of the main YouTubers that does naval, and he does not have a very big following. Granted, naval itself doesn't have a very big following, but if you want to know how to do the naval tasks better, I'll link to that video because I'm not going to be covering that here for the like 3 of you that might actually be interested in naval tasks. Go check that out. But let's start off with air tasks. For the air tasks, remember, and this is also true for the tank tasks, you have to be rank 3 or higher to be able to grind out the vehicles. So if you're grinding with a rank 2, you're just pissing up wind, as they say. You're not going to be getting any progress at all. So make sure that you pick a vehicle correctly before you grind for 4 hours and realize you haven't made any progress. That would not be fun. I've done that before. Not for that long, but I've done it before. Next, remember that you can grind air tasks in ground. Ground kills with planes will still count towards your plane task. And if you end a battle in a plane, it will also count towards that plane task for the wins. Now, what tasks do I personally grind? Personally, I go for the 40 enemies in total, which there's a multiplier for both RB and SB for planes. I go for the 11 kills in one game, which also has a multiplier. You can check, I'll link to the article so you can check all the specifics. I might put the stuff up on the screen, depends on how well I can edit this. And I also go for the tonnage dropped. You can also go for the assists instead. Assists are fairly easy to grind in ground battles with planes. You can just strafe tanks, and it's usually relatively easy to get the assists because basically any minor hit will count for an assist. Also remember, this is true for both the tank and plane. Once again, you only need to get 3 out of those 5 tasks. Sometimes people get confused and think you need to do all 5. No. You only need to do 3. If you realize that, it makes it a lot easier because I understand, like, you see the 5 tasks and you're like, well, I'm not getting it, I guess. I give up. But it's actually a lot easier than you think because it's only the 3. Granted, it is still tricky, but nothing's free. And I kind of mentioned it before, but make sure if you're going for wins with the planes and you're playing ground battles, you have to end in a plane. If you don't end in a plane, it will count for your tanks instead. I'm not sure if this is the case if you, let's say you go land and J out of the plane, it might still count for that plane. I usually try to play it safe and just stay in a plane as long as I can, especially at the end. Can I hear a moth? But like I said, it might count. I'm just, personally, I like to err on the side of caution. But let's get into tanks. For tanks, I recommend not going for assists unless you tend to play in a squad or you feel very confident that you can get the assists, because in my experience, it can be a pain to try to rely on your teammates. As much as you think, oh, my teammates steal my kills all the time. Yeah, they always steal them until you need them to steal them. I don't know, that's how it works for me. I recommend that you grind the kills the 12 in one game, so the 50 in total, which there's no multiplier for the tank kills. I don't know either. And then the 12, which I believe is only 6 in RB and SB, which it is tricky, but it's a lot more doable than you would think. And then the other two that I recommend going for would either be the caps or the wins. Now, obviously, that's pretty much all the tasks, but the tank tasks are relatively pick and choose depending on how you're playing. Usually what I'll do is I'll go for the 2 kills, and then I'll kind of see which one I'm closest to next, and then I'll just try to go for that one and finish it. The same with the plane tasks. It's always best to try to go for 2 of them that you know you can do, and then whichever one you're closest to, just go for that. A pretty simple and straightforward method that a lot of people use for this event is you get into a fast tank, let's just say an R3, as much as I hate those things. You take an R3 and you rush towards the cap. I don't personally recommend the R3 for that. I'd recommend something more like a Hellcat, but you can do it either way. But once you do that, I know a lot of people just jay out to get straight into their planes. Personally, what I do is I try to get as many kills as I can after that point. I defend the point because remember, if you're thinking of doing it, the enemy team's likely to do the same thing. So if you can sit there in something like, that's why I say a Hellcat, and catch other enemy tanks that are going to be the first ones there, which will be other fast tanks, you can actually rack up some easy kills on the people who kind of cruise right into the point, not expecting you to be there, and then bam, you kill them. It can be pretty helpful to get yourself into those kills and to get those higher kill games. And that's something you can use outside of the events as well, but it's very, very useful during the events. But remember that the caps are not always reliable, because sometimes you can end up with like a 1-cap game or even a battle, which you're basically not going to get a cap during that. And also, like I was saying before, there's a lot of people doing this event, so you might have people who also have the same idea of going in fast tanks, but on your team. And if you have a slower PC or slower internet connection or just a slower vehicle, you probably won't make it to the cap in time, and they'll take it before you can. So keep that in mind. And next up, we're going to be looking at a couple lineups that I would personally recommend. Now, obviously, these aren't all the lineups you can play, but they're the ones that I use a lot, or ones that I feel are very competitive that you can use to grind the event. For Russia, I recommend both 4-3 and 8-3. They provide very, very good lineup options. And the only real drawback of those 2 lineups from my experience is that they don't really have the best CAS. 8-3 does have the IL-28, I believe it is, which is actually a decent CAS plane. However, you might not have that high of tier, so you might be stuck with lesser ones. And even 4-3, they're not bad, but unless you have like the Tisma, which that thing will be very, very useful in this event if you do have it. But if you don't have it, you're kind of stuck with like IL-2s, or actually no, I don't think you can even use the IL-2s, probably like the SU-6 maybe, but I think that's a higher BR, so you're not really going to have the best options unless you have like the Stalin Bolt, which is probably the second best after the Tisma. So you're kind of limited on your options for grinding both planes and tank tasks. Next up, probably what I'm going to be playing for some of the event. I'm not entirely certain what I'm going to play yet, but 6-7 France is probably one of my personal favorites to play in the game for when I'm just trying to grind tasks or just kind of relax playing the game. It's quite fun to play, and it has pretty good options for your CAS. You could also do 3-7 France, which is not as good as 6-7 in my opinion, but you still have that good options for a lineup, and you have some good vehicles that you can use, although you have to be careful because some of those could be tier 2, so you have to pick your lineup a little bit carefully. You could also use 4-7 France, but only really if you have the FL10. It's still okay without the FL10, you just don't have a super big lineup option to choose from. Next up, Germany, I would say use 5-3 or 5-7. The only drawback of that, because honestly 5-3 and 5-7 Germany is probably the best lineup at that BR for any nation in the game, because a lot of the vehicles are under tiered. But the only real drawback for those BRs is that there's a lot of people that play them, so you might have trouble getting matches, or you might get really poor matchmaking or mixed matches. So take that into account before you go jumping into your Tiger expecting to get very good games, because you might have a little bit of trouble getting matches. You could also potentially use 4.7 with the KV-1C if you have it, although you could also use the tank destroyers if you don't. That's a very good option in my opinion. You could also, if you don't like playing lower tiers, 9.3 Germany is quite good. I have a lot of fun playing that, but again, that might have Tiger syndrome where there's a lot of players because of the G91, but it could still be a good option for you. And for British tanks, I would just say 4.7 or 6.7. There's not really too much to say about them. They're just kind of decent lineups. They're also good for assists if you're trying to go for that. Whenever I'm trying to go for assists or critical hits for a task, I always try to pick Britain because the solid shot makes it a lot easier. Almost there. We're on to the US now. But the US was kind of tricky for me to pick because there's just so many good lineup options for it. Kind of the two that I thought of right off the bat were 6.3 or 6.7. A lot of the other lineups, they're still good, but they're not really as good as they used to be in my opinion, especially 4.7, because you used to be able to just cheese the events with the jumbos. But I mean, I'm sure you can think of a lot more lineups than I've listed here, and that's pretty much the only nations I would recommend using for the event. If you have other nations, I'm sure you already know a good lineup for those nations, and if you do, please do leave it in the comments, because obviously if I was going to sit here listing off lineups, it would take me all night, and it's already pretty late, as you can probably hear, so I don't want to be sitting here for too long. But yeah, if you have any other lineups, leave them in the description, leave them in the description, genius. Leave them in the comments so that other people can take advantage of that, because like I said, I can't list them all, and some of them personally I don't use, and this is based off of my personal experience, so maybe these aren't the best lineups for you, but they're the best lineups that I use, and I can really only give you advice based off of my own experiences. So if you have better advice for other style players than me, then be sure to leave that down below. And last but not least, you may be finding that you're needing some more advice other than just this. I do have another event video that I made for Operation Frost. I'll be leaving that in the description and probably in a card as well for you guys to check out. It kind of has a lot of the same points as this, but it's a lot better edited because I had power, and it also might touch on a couple things that I may have missed during this because I wrote an entire script, but I'm going off of just notes that I scribbled down off of the script that I wrote, so it's not going to be the best. You can also check out my new series of map guides that I've started to make, as well as the other tutorials. I'll try to link the playlist to all of those in the description if I made one. I can't even remember at this point. But thank you guys very much for watching. I really do sincerely hope that this helped you. I hope you don't mind the unfamiliar accommodations too much. I just figured it was a little bit of a nice change of pace, and I don't really have any other options right now. Hopefully I'll have power back by tomorrow or Sunday. Who knows though. But until then, this is probably the last you'll see of me until Sunday when we start with Shark Week. I really hope that I have power back by then. Hopefully I'll see you then.